So yeah, I'm going to be talking about giving an overview of the thesis topic that I'm going to be carrying out the project on this summer on introducing a compliant unstable substrate into a chimpanzee enclosure. All right, so like many other animals, chimpanzees don't do very well in captivity, especially under captive settings with worse living conditions. They can exhibit repetitive, stereotypic, and stress-related behaviors that signal kind of mental torment. These can include self-directed scratching, hitting, biting, poking one's own eye, pulling out their own hair, all kinds of stuff leading to self-injury that requires medical attention. And they can also pace, rock back and forth, and manipulate and eat their own feces, among other problems. One of the major overarching reasons for the lower welfare in captivity is because of the difference between captive habitats and the historic habitats of chimpanzees. So in the wild, they can have home ranges between 2,000 and 5,000 acres, usually with a lot of different types of climbable plant substrates of different and ever-changing compositions, diameters of branches, branch flexibilities, and branch orientations. Chimpanzees have evolved to effectively navigate and move throughout a complex three-dimensional environment. They also employ complex foraging and hunting strategies to obtain some of the more difficult foods to eat. In captivity, they can be confined to small spaces with less complexity and less usable 3D space. The enclosures tend to lack the thin, elastic, compliant branches that chimpanzees use in the wild, and climbing substrates tend to be more uniform and rigid, with some hanging ropes and swings that are overrepresented compared to in their natural habitat. Most captive environments fail to provide the conditions for appropriate species-typical locomotion, postures, and mobility. But of course, captivity is a broad category and can encompass different types and qualities of zoos, as well as pet cages, laboratories, and sanctuaries. The study population that I'm going to be looking at will be at Chimp Haven, the federal sanctuary for retired chimpanzees in Keithville, Louisiana. Most of these chimps have been retired from biomedical research laboratories, and a lot have been infected with different human diseases. And these chimps are housed in groups of around 11 individuals and given relatively large naturalistic areas to inhabit that have lots of trees and grasses, as well as artificial climbing structures and termite mounds. And they have 24/7 access to outdoor and indoor enclosures. So this is the kind of one of the most ideal places for chimpanzees to end up after being retired from harsher captive settings. Although the goal can only be approached, management of these chimpanzees tries to realize and work towards providing as much of the benefits to chimpanzee welfare that exists in their natural habitats as possible. One of the major ways to infer welfare in captive apes is by examining their activity budgets, including locomotion, postures, and mobility, which can be greater ability and ease of engaging in different positional behaviors has been found to correlate negatively with stress-related and stereotypic behaviors, either by the lower mobility causing depression, depressed and stressed conditions, or from negative emotional conditions leading to lower mobility. It's thought that efforts to increase mobility can help to improve overall physical and emotional well-being in the chimpanzees by ameliorating their pain, requiring less energy demand for performing physical actions, and giving them more control over their lives and their ability to affect change on themselves and their positions in their environment. As you can imagine, being confined to small spaces without much room can really limit their climbing ability and mobility over time. In fact, some of the chimpanzees at Chimp Haven that were tortured at and later rescued from biomedical laboratories had never been outside or seen a tree before arriving at the sanctuary. On top of this, Chimp Haven is a non-breeding facility, so the population skews older, and a lot of them were rescued when they were older as well. So they can have Problems like arthritis, suffered strokes, or just generally take longer to heal from injuries. So here's where I think play comes in. Learning in mammals often involves play behaviors. Under normal chimpanzee development, individuals gain their locomotion and posture abilities by engaging in locomotor play. Locomotor play usually involves cycles where an individual engages in self-handicapping, followed by performing an action with that handicap in place, or by regaining full function in order to perform the action. The self-handicapping can occur by limiting one's musculoskeletal functioning, by inducing sensory impairments, and by entering unusual positions and orientations. What this can look like is an individual can relax particular muscles, leading to a loss of balance, and then the animal tries to regain a controlled posture despite that disadvantage. The individual may also spin in circles or shake their head for a period of time in order to create vertigo, or they might close their eyes while performing an action, and this limits their sensory functions for a time while they continue to try to perform their intended action. Juveniles also employ different types of substrates during locomotor play, particularly those that are more compliant and prone to deforming when a chimpanzee tries to climb on it. Utilizing these substrates can encompass the handicapping phase, since they can cause the animal to lose their balance, particularly when manipulated in purposefully uncontrolled ways. I've got a couple of videos here, but these alternations between states of self-handicapping and recovery have been theorized to help an individual train for unexpected events. Ideal locomotion is not always possible, and there are a lot of things that can interfere with normal movements and sensory functions. By putting themselves in disadvantageous and unbalanced positions, they're solidifying their ability to function against or in spite of unforeseen events that throw ideal movements out of order. This also gives the animal better control of their bodies generally and better spatial awareness to interact effectively with their environment. It's also especially important for apes like chimpanzees who engage in many types of movements in a complex environment where branches might break, distances might be misjudged, an individual might slip, conspecifics might attack, or any number of threats can emerge. In this way, juveniles train their ability to recover from falls that can happen in trees or deal with losses of balance, control, and sensory abilities that occur when being attacked by group members and when quickly changing directions while being chased. So these all confer major survival advantages. Play behavior in chimpanzees becomes less common as individuals age and shifts to focus more on the social play aspect rather than locomotor play in order to build relationships and navigate social situations. Adults rarely play, with few exceptions. Adults rescued from very poor living conditions have been reported to engage in more solitary play behaviors, and captive chimpanzees have been found to engage in play for longer periods of their development compared to wild chimpanzees. So I think that these atypical play behaviors can be related to the that are related to the living conditions. Do not they hold on. Yeah, so they can be related to the living condition because worse conditions lack the ability to promote the learning and skill development that they are evolutionarily programmed to seek. But in general, there's a reason that learning and gaining physical, acrobatic, and locomotor skills occurs by engaging with the flux in one's environment and the flux in one's position and contact with their environment. So many effective physical therapy exercises make use of similar principles to regain strength and mobility. These may involve body exercises that are difficult to maintain or move in certain positions where flexibility and muscle strength increase to compensate for the difficulty. The use of resistance bands similarly requires real-time stabilization, and other exercises can involve different substrates. For example, the Rebound therapy is where patients are instructed to perform exercises on a trampoline or while up on an exercise ball on the trampoline. Attempts to maintain or regain control and stability while on this unstable substrate have been shown to increase balance, spatial awareness, and mobility in individuals with spinal cord injuries, stroke victims, and people with severe intellectual impairments. Furthermore, there have been observable increases in quality of life scores in people with severe intellectual impairments who undergo rebound therapy. Similar results are seen when patients perform exercises in pools of water because the added and unexpected resistance to certain movements in the water encourages transitional muscle development. And physical therapists also prescribe exercises using foam pads that make it difficult for patients to balance while performing the exercises. So some physical therapy programs have been tried with chimpanzees. One recent study had chimpanzees with physical impediments to their mobility, particularly ones related to aging, engage in they're trained to do certain postures for a food reward. I have a picture on the right there of a chimpanzee training with a resistance band because they have an injury in their hand. And there are also other exercises where they train them to do squats and things like that and change how they're hanging on things. And the results of this study were very promising and showed that they had increased mobility and decreased impediments to their movements, but also reduced stereotypic and stress-related behaviors. So I would add, not only is physical therapy a useful tool for recovering from injuries, but it's also good as a preventative measure against injuries, particularly against more vulnerable populations of animals that are older. I believe it's also the case that utilizing the different substrates, particularly compliant ones that are more responsive to an animal's actions and require more mobility to use, can allow for increased mobility in general, just by the total amount in their environment of different types of substrates. So that's why in this project, I want to introduce a more compliant substrate into the mix of their environments. So the project will kind of draw from both theories relating to locomotor play and human physical therapies. So I'll build an unstable compliant substrate that's basically a big water bladder made out of fused sheets of plastic filled with water and then covered with fabric and tarp and with a foam underneath to protect it. But also the foam will make it so they're never contacting with a hard surface, and the water will make it more difficult to balance as the water sloshes around the thing and they try to balance on top of it. So I'll record data for 2 weeks before introducing it, and then for 4 weeks while it's present, and then for the additional 2 weeks after removing it. So I'll collect data on the activity budgets and including the different locomotor modes and positional modes that they go in during the study. And I'll also be measuring the mobility in a new method that I'm developing, which will be based on separating the total amount of time that they're moving between gait locomotion, which are the repetitive or cyclical kinds of motions on one substrate, versus the non-gait locomotions, which is everything else basically. And that the reason behind that is that it would seem to be more difficult for older individuals to do those transitions between different things. All right. So yeah, I hope to find that this substrate creates better living conditions for them, and individuals who use it more will end up with greater increases to their mobility. And I hope that this can highlight the importance of including and considering unstable and compliant substrates, as well as just general physical properties of the substrates in their environment in order to increase their overall well-being, including their mental and emotional health. And I hope that this will also allow them to engage in general, not just when on the substrate, but in their climbing and everything, with more species-typical locomotion, which will is beneficial for all kinds of reasons, including potential reintroduction efforts that are more successful when, with species-typical behavior. And in conclusion, chimpanzees, like many other animals, have been subject to a high degree of anthropogenic disturbance, both in their natural habitats and when brought into human captivity with horrific effects. We should do what we can to maximize their quality of life, which for chimpanzees especially should place special emphasis on the use of different substrates because of chimpanzees' natural variety in locomotor and positional behaviors. I believe we can draw from the unified functions of locomotor play during typical chimpanzee development and that of physical therapy techniques in humans in order to create environmental designs that can promote greater well-being in the chimpanzees.
Thank you, Joey.